Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's May 28, 2024. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Philip Perkins. Where in the heck you calling in from, Phil?
More or less Berkeley, California.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
The best thing,
Yeah,
love.
that's the answer I get the most. Thank you. I agree. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I still read print,
Yeah.
dead tree print.
How cool is that? Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
No, my parents were teachers, so reading was kind of a deal.
Yeah.
Everybody read
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
because without information, you're dead meat.
Dead meat. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
Oh, I think it's innate. I think all
Yeah.
animals collect information,
Yeah.
but it's survival, but one way
Do
or the other.
yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
I guess. I
Yeah.
mean, it seems it's a two-way street.
Yep. Yeah, I appreciate it too because that's what I'm after, your guess, your hunch, because I might ask a question, you go, "I don't know, I can't answer that." I'm welcome to all those in tangents, anecdote stories. So, Phil, fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
Hear it.
yeah. McLuhan says, "I don't know what I think until I say it." Joan Didion says, "I don't know what I think until I write it." I like your answer. Thank you. Can humans think without language?
I wouldn't know because I think in language.
Wow. Chomsky says that a language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Well, if when that happens, I'm probably working on a piece, which is one of the reasons I do them, is to get away from language because I'm one of those people who lives in their own head and there's like this language loop going all the time. So the way you escape it is you do something. I used to do it, escape it by playing music. I can't do that anymore. So I do it by making sound works that are where it's all about intuition and um, serendipity and your best guess and all of that language stuff goes on hold.
Yeah. I just read the review of Sonny Rollins' notebooks, and it basically says what you were just talking about. But there's a somewhat what you talked about there touched on a McLuhan line. I'm curious. Carefully make plans, then do the opposite. Is that similar to what you're talking about or not?
Well, first of all, in my regular life, that wouldn't work very well because I can't make plans say that affect my granddaughter and then do the opposite. That isn't going to work, and I can't make plans that affect my clients and then do the opposite. That won't work for them either. But in terms of making art, yeah, it's important to be open to um, continue to be open to throwing out what you thought you were going to do. And in my own work, my own artwork, which is mostly sound these days, um, I find the more detailed plans I make, the worse it comes out.
Yeah, we're going to get into that soon. Your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Feeling.
Yeah. Two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
I wouldn't know.
Two, can machines think?
Well, I guess that's all down to definition of what thinking is.
Yeah.
Um, and that everybody thinks that is becoming increasingly blurry with AI, and that I'm really not sure that I think that what I'm seeing happening with AI is really thinking, or whether it's just machine function on a very, very high level.
Yeah. McLuhan made the distinction matching and making. It's like we're makers, but I think machines are kind of more like just matching.
Well, that describes what a trained AI is. I mean, it only knows what it's been trained, and then it can draw other conclusions. Apparently, I'm
Yeah.
not any kind of expert. Um, you know, human brains don't really function that way. You only know what you know, but then you're able to make. Um, I don't know. I feel like you're able to process information in a different way um, because you're an organic being.
Yeah. It's a good word. I like that. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
They're kind of the same for me.
Well, I got it from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He says happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning does.
I guess, in as much as anything lasts, in anything human or any emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that famous quote, when the Roman generals would be parading through the street, being cheered, that they would have somebody on the back of the chariot whispering in their ear that all glory was fleeting.
Yeah.
And that's how it is for all that stuff. Just like, yeah, I mean, when I work for this dance company I work for, we pull off a big show. We just did 2 really big ones at really big venues in the East Coast, and that was a big deal. And then the next day, you're back to thinking, "I'm still a failure." It's just, the high wears off really fast. So
Phil, you might appreciate one of my favorite Zappa lines. I'm a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure.
it sounds like something you'd say.
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, no, don't be sorry. That's totally fine. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Uh, in terms of physics, they're probably the same.
Wow, I like that. So the poet Audre Lorde said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Your own mind, because your own mind is unique.
Yeah. Your own mind. Thank you.
I actually interviewed her, and
Which one? Yeah,
Yvonne, Yvonne,
Audre Lorde or Yvonne? Yeah.
Yvonne, and
Yeah.
it was for a film about her, and was mightily impressed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, with very a person of quite few words, really perceptive, um, cut right to the heart of the matter of all the questions that she would ask. I
Yeah.
recorded a lot of interviews in my time, and that was one of the most interesting.
Beautiful. See, I'm open for these stories and side tangents because see, most people well, here's the thing. I open up some of these questions with cute quotes. It doesn't mean you have to apply them. The basic question is, what tool do you gravitate towards? And you answer it your own mind. And then they go, do you mean to dismantle the master's house? Well, that's y- Audre Lorde kind of setting up a metaphorical thing, maybe. Maybe it's not metaphorical, it's white supremacy. And then most people don't even hear the second line that Yvonne Rainer says, no, you can, if you expose the tool.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it sounds like all these great artists that I look up to that you've worked with, The Residents, Negative Land, Blue Jean Tyranny. I mean, it's endless. You've touched on all my heroes in so
Well,
many
there's,
ways.
for all of those people, you know, I'm not going to listen anymore to what you think I can't do
Yeah,
or don't get to do,
yeah,
and I'm going to, and those people. I mean, a lot of us who do follow them and seize the means of production, so to speak. We don't end up making great art because we don't turn out to be geniuses on their level, but they did.
Yeah.
And that's why they're our mentors.
Yeah. Really well put. And you can do what, Newton taught Echo is stand on the shoulders of giants and try to look farther. And sometimes maybe we will look farther. What new toy do you suggest?
Um, I'm not going to answer in terms of equipment. With a new toy to me is a new sound that I've found.
Yeah.
Usually, probably recorded on my phone. That I just happened on,
Yeah.
like a lot of people now. And that's what my current work is built out of, or that I tripped over on the web and
Yeah.
stole
Yeah.
and then did something to.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's the most interesting to me. I mean, I own a great deal of sound equipment, and I don't get very excited about any of it. I'm very happy to have it, especially when I'm working with somebody else. But no, the thing that gets me the most excited to do is finding some sound that seems like it might work with some other sound that I might already have.
Yeah. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Which aspect of the flaming world is going to blow up more next?
Sorry to laugh, that's serious. But you said of the flaming world?
Right. The world's on fire, but it's on
Yeah.
fire in all these different places. So there's a whole lot of fires.
Yeah.
And you worry that the fires are going to be like a forest fire and eventually they're going to,
Yeah.
and then,
Well, maybe it's our job to do like American Indians, indigenous native people did that. They didn't fight fires, they managed fires. It's all about
well,
the
I
attitude,
don't know
right?
how you manage the battle going on in Rafa right now. So
Right.
I don't know. They probably don't want my suggestions. So either side. So, but that's just an example, So yeah, that kind of keeps me up at night, and all the more because I have a grandchild. So all of a sudden you're looking at this little kid and going, oh, what have we done?
Yeah. Well, then I'll throw this one in that comes later. How do we stop our governments from going to war?
Well, the first thing is vote, and
Very
and a lot of people just are not down to vote for
Yeah.
whatever reason. And then
Yep.
the second thing would be if you're going to vote, then think about what you're doing and realize that there's, especially in American democracy, there's no perfect. It's sausage, and so
Yeah.
and it's going to be the whatever you think the least
Yeah.
bad
Yeah.
alternative is.
Yep. Really good. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Phil, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Because they're inconvenient.
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
Everybody has moral obligations. Artists
Yeah.
are just more people.
Yep. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid of any ideas.
Yeah.
I don't think an idea can hurt me. It's somebody acting on an idea that worries me,
Yep.
and they could be old or new.
Appreciate you being articulate and concise, dude. I appreciate it. Very good. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Um, Probably being locked in a closet by mistake in preschool with two other kids, and us yelling at trying to get people to come and unlock the door. And the kid, I have this vivid auditory memory in the dark of seeing the outline of the light on the door because this was an outdoor storage building where they kept all the trikes and stuff. So I could see this rectangle of light, and then next to me, this kid incessantly ringing a bike bell. Ding, 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 thinking that that was going to bring somebody. So I still have like these nightmares of being in this dark room with this rectangle of light and this bell going off.
Wow. What city was that?
Detroit, Michigan.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me? I'm from Flint, Michigan. What part of Detroit?
Well, the school I went to was in Grosse Pointe. I can't remember what part we lived in.
Yeah.
That was like preschool, first grade.
Yeah. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It doesn't matter. I mean, because you're going to have it anyway. And the thing is, now that I'm an old person, I find that my memories are so distorted because, once you've told the story a million times, like the story I just told you, it probably didn't happen like that, but that's how I've already told it. So now in my mind, that's how it was. But if I ever did find the other kid who was in there, would say, no, you're out of your mind. That didn't happen. They got us out right away. And there was no bike in there with a bell. What are you talking about? So.
Very good. Tell me someone within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Everybody in my family looked up to my father's father, um, and because particularly he was a doctor and a rural doctor in what was then very rural Pennsylvania, and he was unlike pretty much everybody else in the family, which was that he was very calm and very observant and didn't get pissed off really easily. And like I mean, my father and all of his brothers and all the other cousins and uncles are all yellers, and he wasn't.
Wow.
And so that made him the center of the family. He was like the switchboard. So
Wow.
when the people could go through to speak to each other. And when he passed, much too young, the family fell apart
Wow.
because they couldn't talk.
Woo! Amazing. So articulate. Thank you. So, how about outside your immediate family?
Well, I've had a number of pretty interesting mentors. Just recently, Tommy at Unseen World Records um, decided, we've done a couple of projects with the late Blue Jean Tyranny's work that he left behind, including the 6 CD set that Tommy put out on Unseen Worlds. That was mostly live recordings. And then there's a bunch of other things that came that were kind of like odd things that were left behind. Something that Blue Jean put out on our little cassette label in 1980 and never really got out very far because Blue Jean was too lazy to ever duplicate the cassettes. And and the more I think about it, I mean, he was one of those people who was a mentor without actually seeming to do anything.
Yeah.
Just the way he was and the way he listened and his incredibly broad self-education and interests. You could talk to him about anything, and it would turn out that he would be very well read in that, even though I don't think Blue went to college at all. And he turned down a scholarship to Juilliard because they told him that he had to be a performance major, and he said, "No, I'm sorry, I'm a composer." And they said, "No, no, you're not." And he said, "Later." And but he would have done that in this extremely polite, very low key, non-angry way, probably speaking at the resonant frequency of the room, which he liked to do, which made you have to lean in to hear him.
And it was worth it.
He was very smart about that. And so he was very much a mentor to me, even though I didn't have anything remotely resembling his performance chops. I could not play what he could play. I couldn't play any of his music.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, but I can drive him around and listen to him talk. So that's what I did. I was his chauffeur for a while.
How cool. Yeah, I did all these questions with him once, and I was so honored. And, the one thing that sticks out is, why do all these guys writing Iggy books call me about Iggy? Why don't they talk to me about me?
Right. Well, or writing about Bob Ashley or something like that.
Right, whoever,
Right.
But I was fortunate to see him perform with Padalesco live at the old A&D in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as the pre-show to Ann Arbor Film Festivals,
Right.
and changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Just
it's watching him, just like realizing. I mean, I see this all the time now when I work with Alonzo King and with the dance company, and I see them create a new ballet like right in front of me, out of
yeah.
thin air. Okay, well, Blue Jean could do the same thing. He would sit down at the piano, and this piece would happen. And you thinking, okay, well, so you're like, you made some notes ahead of time. No, what did you do ahead of time? I lived my life, and what you're hearing is my life up until that moment.
Beautiful. So, did your parents raise you a particular religion?
They tried, but it didn't really take very well.
Do you pray?
No, my mother was a member of the Episcopal clergy at the end of her life, so I had a family member in the business, so to speak.
Yeah. If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Welcome.
Yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I don't understand the concept of evil as separate from people,
Yeah.
as an abstract entity. People just are the way they are because of a lot of really complicated reasons in their personal lives, and there are a lot of people who have had really bad lives, and they become warped. It seems unlikely that as an animal you would have been born that warped. You ended up that way because that's how it worked for you,
Yeah.
and you were around people who were like that and accepted it.
The real hidden question here, Phil, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, that's another way of saying, like, you're letting them get to you. But then you got to back up and say, because, well, for me, it's like, how is it that this person is my enemy? And what are we enemies about? Are we competing for the same romantic partner? Okay, well, that's a fool's game because you don't you don't actually get to choose. The other person chooses you. If you're competing in like some kind of business thing, then um, all the really successful entrepreneurial types that I've ever been around, mostly because I was a sound guy, recording an interview. We're very the successful ones. I'm talking about Steve Jobs level people are very much you win some, you lose some. So I don't really understand the concept. It's like if it's an enemy because this person really wishes you ill, then I guess my mother, the Episcopal clergy woman, would say, well, you need to think to yourself why it is they think that about you.
Yeah.
How did they get to that? What did you do? I
Yeah.
mean, it's really easy. I found, in especially when I was younger, I found it incredibly easy to piss people off without realizing that I'd done it. And then you realize, okay, well, that's why they're so weird to me. You did something that really got to them, and what's even pissing them off even more is that they can see that you don't even realize that you did that. So then that's on you.
Where's your tipping point? Where you learn that? Is there a specific time in your life where you go, I've just
Just
this
bad, mostly from jobs, and and I even had one this year where that happened, and I thought, God, did I not learn anything? How
Sorry
did
for
I how did I get this guy so pissed off at me? This is really destructive. We're our whole show is in trouble now. This entire enterprise because I've managed to piss this guy off without realizing it. And you kind
Yeah.
of go, what? So you hope that you learn, but then you realize that maybe it doesn't always stick, or it is
But
You
Phil,
bet.
you seem like the kind of guy, it may have not been 100% you. Couldn't you figure it was 50 him and 50 you
Oh, it
failing?
definitely was him. But the
Right.
thing is, it's like, in these kind of situations when you're doing a show, it's just like, okay, you're a guest. It's his hall, not
Right.
yours.
Right.
It's the classic, like, you do like a band coming in.
I
Okay,
know. Yeah.
so how do you massage the house folks who, would like to maybe hate you, or maybe not like you very much because they're tired and you're like the fifth thing they've done this week or
Yeah.
whatever. So, and the people who are the masters, my former musical partner, Scott Fraser's one of the greats, somehow turns them around.
Yeah.
He's just that charming.
Yeah.
So anyway, to answer your question, it's like um, there may be people that there's been some bad things between you and them, and you're not ever going to be able to fix it because and if that's true, it's because they don't want to fix it.
Yeah.
And that's eventually can become some part of someone's identity.
Sure. Well, you sort of touched on the follow-up as Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson said, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. You can go wherever you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
Yeah, I mean the threat of it. There are people apparently for who are just so deluded that they don't think that the punishment will affect them, and they're all wrong. It will. If you go, by which I mean going to prison. Going to prison will break you. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how arrogant you are or how strong you are. But and otherwise punishment. My parents might have possibly over punished us, particularly me because I was the oldest, and that ended up being a problem for them
Yeah.
because when I became an adult, then we went through a long period of non-communication because there was some abiding bitterness. So the problem with punishment is it's just as much for the punisher as it is for the person who, in theory, is being punished. It's
Yeah.
it definitely this. I mean, I can say this because he's long gone, but that kind of stuff that definitely scarred my father.
Yeah.
What he did to me,
Yeah.
and it meant that we ended up with this. The only way we could talk was on the phone.
Yeah.
It just could not be in person.
Well, Phil, here's a quickie. If Trump goes to jail, he cannot run for president. He writes a book and says, I'm sorry, I did wrong. Would you forgive him?
I don't know. The It seems so wildly implausible,
That's what most people say.
but it could happen because he probably would have it ghostwritten anyway because he can't put a sentence together. Um, he's one of those people that has been set on a track for so long that to somebody. I mean, you appear. I'm sorry to say, you're not a young man. You have a lot of experience. You just like that. You would just say, okay, I really don't think that he could change his stripes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he may be sorry in some form, but he's just way too far down that track.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people like that. So,
Yeah.
in terms of forgiving him, I don't know. What difference does it make?
Yeah.
Really?
James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, because in art, there's life is really time consuming, and it's, everything is really spread out. And a lot of times when something you see or hear or did, it doesn't become meaningful to you till later because it's so diffuse. Whereas a work of art distills it and puts it right in front of you. And then also, it's interesting to know what somebody else's, the artist's, um, take is on it. And it helps you, for me, particularly with someone like Faulkner, understand a sort of person that I had never really encountered very much in his novels. It's like, you say, oh, okay, that's why they're so bitter, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Mike Kelly says art is making your problems other people's problems. Any thought on that?
Oh, I don't think I agree. Maybe a certain kind of art, or if you're like doing a certain kind of very confrontational theater or something like that. But the what I do is only somebody else's problem if someone forced them to listen to it, and which probably isn't going to happen. They can turn it off.
Yeah. Well, kind of walk us through, Phil, your tipping points when I mean you're many things, but let's call you a sound artist. Would that be good? Or a music yes, let's call
That's
sound
okay.
artist.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, sound artist. Where's your tipping point? You go, "Oh, that's what I wanna pursue." You're in that room with the bell ringing, but where did you go, "Oh, that's my calling." Where's that tipping point? Like, what'd you study in high school and college? And was that preparing you for what your calling is? Or where's your tipping point to say, "That's my calling"?
Well, in high school, I was in a lot of bands, and that turned out to be as much a social thing as it was making music because we didn't make any original music. You were judged by how much like somebody else's record you sounded. Um, and then later on, started doing more original work and found that I was interested after a long period as taking still photographs, that I was interested in work that took place that had duration in time. So that led me into filmmaking, quote unquote experimental filmmaking in the 70s and the 80s. And then, not unlike the residents, discovered that filmmaking was at that time so expensive and so difficult and so non spontaneous, unless you had a great deal of money, that it was easier to work with audio and you could get a tape recorder or two from a pawn shop. And then now you were making, works of duration, in time, but you were doing it with sound. And so a lot of us in that time period started that way. So, and then you used to, who did you know? What happened when I came back to California? I lived in Oregon for quite a while in the 70s. And then when we came back to California, um, fell in with a group of people around Canyon Cinema, which is one of the reasons I came here, the experimental film co-op, distribution co-op. And, went to the Canyon Cinematheque twice a week, like church. And, but eventually met these people, mostly from Mills College. And there was just this great sense of possibility in,
Yeah.
in working with sound as opposed to image. And I seem to have more talent or a feel for that than the other anyway. So you kind of go where it feels like, well, I have a certain innate facility with this medium, so I'm going to do that. Even though I still work like a painter or a filmmaker, um, the medium is mostly sound files.
Really good, Phil. You're really concise and articulate. So, just a quickie, did you ever read Scott McDonald's book on the history of Canyon cinema?
Did I?
Anyways, it came out several years ago. Just curious.
I mean, I was heavily indoctrinated by the older people who were around
Yeah,
in um, 77 when I came back here, and I ended up on the board of Canyon for a couple
yeah,
of years,
yeah.
mostly because I had a van and I could help move the collection from Gate 5 Sausalito to the American Can Company building in San Francisco. Oh, you have a van, you can be on the board. Great.
And when you were in those cover bands, what was your main instrument?
I started out as a rhythm guitar player, and then the music changed and nobody wanted a rhythm guitar player. So I discovered that everybody needed a bass player, and there weren't hardly any. So I became a bass player. It wasn't that I had any particular talent as a bass player,
Yeah,
but if you were willing to play the bass and you had a bass, you could get a job very easily. So I could be in like a couple of bands at the same time because nobody really wanted to play the bass. They all wanted to be lead guitar players and singers and drummers. So that worked out quite well. I mean, years later, in terms of like when I was on film crews, originally I wanted to be a director of photography, and
yeah,
did a couple of interesting projects, particularly with the Crypto Corporation. But then discovered that I was never going to. I was not thought of as talented enough to actually make a living doing it. But everybody needed a sound guy
yeah.
to record on location. So if I was willing to do that, then I could work. So I switched. I used to tell people that, in terms of my music work or music and sound work, that I was a filmmaker vacationing in new music, and
Yeah.
I went native.
It's great. And so McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extends your teeth, shutter in a camera extends your eyelid. Maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy extends consciousness. What is the mixing board? That's kind of your main tool. Would you say the mixing board, the engine? Yeah. What is?
I don't have but I don't know. I don't use a mixing board anymore. I use a picture of a mixing board, and
Right. But you know what I'm saying. That tool. What
yeah.
what
But
human?
I don't get too emotional about it. I mean, I try not.
Yeah.
I've had so much equipment for so long. It's just like I tell my younger assistants, do not love the equipment. It does not love you back.
But
You
I'm
know,
not asking you to love it. I'm just saying, what humanness does it extend? Like
oh, selective hearing. I mean, when
selective hearing. Yeah.
so when you sit in, like, if you go outside, and I sat on my front porch right now.
Yeah.
I live, in the Bay Area. The BART
Yeah.
train runs behind that houses across the street from me. My street is one of the main thoroughfares coming and going to both the high school and the junior high,
Yeah.
on and on. So, so as you're sitting there, you're selectively listening. I'm listening to the train. I'm listening to this kid talking. I'm listening to this car. I'm listening to this dog barking. Okay, well, that's what you get to do in the mixing console.
Yeah.
Is and in the case of modern technology, like something like Ableton, you can just say, well, I like that so much, I'm going to make it happen over and over again.
Yeah.
And so that kind of thing.
The screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're making one of those fill pieces? Not no commission, nobody else. You may be a partner, but one of those cassettes that I bought many years ago, or a piece of fill sound art. What role does intention play?
Well, I can really only talk about how things are now, in
Okay. Yeah.
and in now, there's next to no intention.
Yeah.
I think of I mean, this is really pretentious sounding, but I'm a fan of the action painters.
Yeah.
Basically, you walk into the studio, there's the paint, there's the canvas. It's today, it's right now. What do you
Yeah.
make out of this, out of your current emotional state and everything else that's happening to you? And then when it's done, either it sucks, probably, and you throw it out, and maybe you want to look at it again, you put it aside and you look at it again later, and then you throw it out. And maybe out of all of those, in my case, for an album that has like maybe 9 or 10 pieces on it, there might have been 60 pieces made, that I threw out. and
Yeah.
I'm still not sure about the ones that I put on the album. So, the whole point of it is to disconnect from intention, at least consciously.
Yeah. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking your potential listener when you're making your piece?
Well, I make most of my work with radio in mind. In other words, I feel like radio is the best way for someone like me to reach an audience. And the thing that has a bunch of things about it that I like. One is that, I make a physical media, probably a CD, that it gets sent to either a radio person or a radio station. They have to randomly discover it. They have to decide they want to program it. And then they throw it in amongst a whole bunch of other stuff, one piece. So you trip over it by accident in a random sort of way to you that day, rather than sitting and, I don't really see the point of listening to like all of one of my albums. And if they do, I always encourage people to shuffle the order up. But to me, they work best when you take one of these pieces and you drop it in the middle of some DJ's interesting DJ set. Some DJ who is like is thinking about what they're doing and how they're structuring their sets and stuff. And that's the ideal for me. And
Yeah.
that's who I'm making it for them, and then for the people who listen to them.
Yeah. I'm a huge radio person. And I appreciate what you just said. I love that. That was really, it's that whole juxtaposition.
Right.
We grew up on albums and you hear the whole album. And so that was beautiful because it sort of leads into this issue of archiving, which we're doing research on now in a movie. And basically the two questions is archiving more innate or more invented, and what do you plans do you have for your own archive? But it's a long setup. So the word archive comes from 1400s, keep safe from harm. Then 200 years later, it was what we know it as, a record preserved as evidence. But here's Charles Baudelaire: if you try to make a statement long, deep, and rich, it will age very fast. If you try to only own the day you're talking, it will last forever. Really beautiful. Sorry, it came from, or it reminded me of David Lee Roth, Here Today, Gone Later Today, or I got it from Norman Klein's History of Forgetting. Modernists tear down, now we must retrofit our mistakes, but it's like, be here now. Ram Dass. The point of life is to live in the moment. And I mean, that's what you say now. When you said now, what I be here now is no intention. Wyndham Lewis said, artists live in the present, write detailed history of the future. So even the Egyptians kept stuff in their coffin with them. So I'm just curious, your thoughts. Is archiving more innate or more invented?
Oh, I think it's innate. You have a urge to speak to the future. I mean, that's why people painted on the walls of caves. I mean, yes, they were making magic, but since they were human beings, I'm pretty sure that somewhere in their mind was, I'm going to paint this, and then I'm going to get eaten by a tiger, but then other people are going to come through here and see what I did. And it's right now we're involved in a project with Alonzo King, with his dance company that I work for. It's like, he has an enormous body of work. It's mostly recorded on video, is how it exists. And the early stuff looks dreadful, of course, because it's from the 80s, and low budget video from the 80s. And but it feels important to us in, in all the pieces that we've made I've been with him for 13 years, that it be able to be able to speak to the future in that way, especially in a medium like dance, which is ephemeral and only in the moment. You can't take the place of you seeing them live with those dancers, but in the same way that a recording that I remastered of Blue Jean isn't the same as sitting in front of him when he was playing, but that's all we got.
Yeah.
And you
And
can
so,
learn from it, that
yeah.
it becomes part of the sedimentary nature of culture, and that's valuable.
Yeah, oh yeah, I mean, I'm a library freak. As soon as this ends, I go to the library, but I also love the futurists saying burn all libraries and destroy all the museums, and so it's if the point of life is to be here now, I just, trying to navigate
Let's
that.
just say, let's say it's an informed now.
An informed now.
Right.
That's
Like you like now is going to mean a whole lot more to you if you spent maybe some time in the library and a museum. Your life will be much richer, and as an artist, you'll have some idea that it's kind of important as an artist to realize that maybe you're not as original as you think you are. That you're it seems important anyway,
yeah,
or at least have that kind of humility.
yeah. And do you have plans for your own archives? You have boxes of stuff, I'm sure. Are they going into an archive, or do you just say, "When I die, my friends or family will take care of it"? Any plans?
Nobody in my family, including my wife, is remotely interested in my stuff. So, if they keep the website up, if Artifact Recordings keeps their Bandcamp site up, that's highly, it's not necessarily true because everybody else who's important at Artifact is as old as I am. I don't know. And I've made so many albums, I've made like probably 22 or 3 albums. I always wonder what Zappa thought about this, because at some point you just kind of fall out of love with all of them. And you kind of went, okay, everybody is, you shotgun them out. That's why the radio thing is important, is you end up hopefully on the shelves of all these radio stations, and they don't, throw all the CDs in the trash the way some stations have when they change formats. And then no, you're not Baudelaire, and you're not Bach, and you're not Mozart, or even somebody more famous more recently, or Blue Jean, for instance. So if it ends up disappearing, is the world that much poorer? Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, it did what could do for me, and maybe a few other people along the way, and that's probably all you can expect. I mean, there's no that's the problem with this kind of work, is there isn't a physical object in the sense of a painting, but then it's more portable than a painting. It's easier to save.
Yeah.
I don't know what piece, like if I really was an action painter by now, I would have like a storage building full of a whole bunch of canvases I didn't like anymore. So what do you do with them? It's firewood. So
Yeah, it's very interesting. You brought up a lot of good points there, and yeah, for Frank, he did 60 albums in 30 years. That's enough. He left us with a lot. There's 100 releases since he died. It's like,
right.
oh, I haven't listened to really one of them. But anyways, it was like Joan Baez said it well. "Oh, we're making a documentary on you. Got any archive?" And she goes, "Yeah, I have a storage space. My mom, I never opened it in 50 years." So the documentarians were like, "Wow, we hit pay dirt." So, they're sitting there interviewing her about the movie, and she goes, "So what are you going to do with your archive?" She goes, "I don't care. Throw it off the side of a mountain. I don't want it. I don't
Right.
care." And her assistant went, "Oh, we're negotiating with Smithsonian right now."
Right.
Now, of course, it's important, but it's like, it's this whole world of archiving. It's a huge business.
Oh,
I got lucky. All my audio cassettes, Phil, of all my interviews are in a really good archive at the University of Santa Barbara in
well, they
California.
should be. They
I
should be.
got lucky.
Yeah.
I got lucky, and they showed me, and I go in, and there's these big, like, Citizen Kane, they pull out this thing, and they're all climate controlled. It's like, oy vey. So,
That's not gonna, that will not happen for me.
well, the follow-up question was, do you think we should worry? Will the internet ever be turned off?
Well, it's gonna change. And the thing that we know about anything that has an operating system is sooner or later, something that you're using with it will stop working. And so it could be like, already, I just had a email today from the composer John Bischoff, who's from the Mills orbit, and I recorded an album with him in the '80s on a half-inch 8-track machine. Well, they want to archive. Mills, the Center for Contemporary Music, wants to archive it. He goes, "No, I don't have that tape deck anymore, and haven't had it in 25 years." And so that kind of, that kind of thing. So inevitably, there's going to come a point where, like, a wave file is not something that's easily read anymore.
Yeah.
So
No, I dumpster dive. I find books. I found a book that's 100 years old. It's still readable. I
right,
don't need a device to read it.
right.
But, I can dumpster dive thumb drives and DVDs and VHS tapes, and it gets a little harder to find them hardware to play them.
Well, and and I cited a remark, and our irony is, still have new old stock of LPs that are more than 40 years old now, that have just been in storage. One of my storage places was overrun by rats.
Yeah.
Rats are incontinent, so they're a mess. Okay, but inside the boxes, these LPs will still play. And I thought, okay, 40 years from the CD that I make, with disc makers or Atomic today, is that disc going to play? You going to put money on that? I think not. And
Thank
will
God for
and will
the vinyl will still play is what
Right.
you're yeah.
Right. That's the point. And it turned out to be relatively, and in cassettes, when we used to joke, he goes, yeah, cassettes seem so fragile. He goes, no, there's some kid out in the Sahara sitting under a bush who's put together a Walkman that he found in the trash and a couple of batteries that he's jimmied with the foil from some gum to make it run. And he's listening to a cassette.
Yeah.
He's not listening to an MP3.
Yeah.
Because he has no way to do that.
Yeah.
And it's those file formats that are all going to change soon. And in terms of the internet, things that people are relying on, Spotify or whatever. Yeah, that's just a corporate buyout away from completely disappearing. Like what happened to MySpace.
Yeah.
My daughter had a band, all of their stuff disappeared.
Oh, yeah, that's my friend. I want you to meet him if you come to LA sometimes. Brad Kay, he's a historian, trades 78s with our Crumb, and he has a lathe for every recording device, or he has every recording format ever, and he has a lathe to make cylinders.
Wow.
And he has a 7 or 8 inch, it's on YouTube, shellac one-sided of the song Finnegan's Wake from 1895 or something, but we preserved it on Pixel Vision and digital film of him playing it, so it's on YouTube, so people can actually hear a
Well,
guy.
that's the only way for in the digital age for someone like me who isn't going to be archived by the Smithsonian or anybody else, is the only way. All you have is shotgunning. You just get it out to as many places as possible.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we still make 100 or 200 CDs, even though probably close to zero of them will ever actually be sold.
Yeah.
They're being given away.
Yeah.
Hopefully to people on other continents.
Yeah.
So when America falls in the ocean, they'll still have it.
Yeah. Phil, what's the function of music?
I don't think music has a function.
Yeah.
Music
Copeland, go ahead. Sorry.
Music is what's the function of painting?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I mean, that's
it's an art form, not car mechanics.
Copeland says the 4 elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. How do you focus and integrate those 4? What's your process, or any thoughts on integrating?
It's much less formal. I mean, Copeland was a trained composer, and it had how you begin and how you proceed and how you end making a composition drilled into him by the best of the best, Boulanger, people like that.
Yeah.
For me, as an almost completely uneducated musician and engineer, it's kind of, what is it that I can do with what I have?
Yeah.
And what occurs to me to be a good idea. And most of the time it's not successful, even on my own, even to me, let alone anyone else.
But there's something that keeps you going.
Because once in a while it seems like it works.
Yeah.
And whether that's luck or talent or both, I don't know. And I guess I probably don't care. It happens often enough that I keep doing it.
Yeah. My friend says the 3 T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. So technique, you've learned how to do the thing. Theory, you know the structure. How does one acquire taste?
Well, you expose yourself to a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then some people actually who turn out to not really even know very much turn out to have great taste. So it's hard to say. But I mean, it's another way of saying talent. And talent is another way of saying that you're able to make something that other people view or hear as being worthwhile to interact with. You know, there's a lot of people who have the skill to make music, but you just don't find their music compelling. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who have hardly virtually no training, and they pick up an instrument and it's like, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's the mystery of the human mind, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's odd, and the poet said, "The mystery of art is we don't know if it activates or pacifies us," and it's like everybody I would ask, "Do you like the Shags?" One guy goes, "I don't get the Shags, please." If finally someone dissed the Shags.
I no, I would never diss the Shags. I mean, first of all, their history is that they were coerced,
Right, right,
to
coerced.
anyway, but they couldn't have been coerced to the point that they wouldn't. I mean, they could have just said no to their father, yeah, and then just taken the spanking. But so there was something that they felt the need to do
Yeah,
that, and
yeah,
there's I mean, I was in a lot of really bad bands, so I'm really sympathetic to the
yeah.
Shags.
Yeah,
It's
and
just
they were being pelted with Coke cans at their
right.
high school, and it's like, okay, so but here's this taste taken a little farther. This is a McLuhan quote. There's 2 parts to it. I'm curious your thoughts on it. Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
That's too deep for me.
What's more fundamental, language or music?
I don't think there's a contest. I think they're I think language and music are actually kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Tell me an instrumental song title, instrumental that makes you laugh.
I have one on the tip of my tongue and I can't think of it. Oh, raunchy.
Who's it by?
I thought that was Dick Dale,
Oh, it's an instrumental, "Raunchy" by Dick Dale, okay.
but I'm
Yeah,
not sure it is Dale.
yeah,
It's
but
it's
it's in that genre, yeah.
right,
Yeah, because Dwayne Eddy just died last week,
and
and
it could have been him.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's that kind of yeah, very good. And so, my friend had a great comment on Thelonious Monk. He said, "Monk heard all the notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them."
Oh, that sounds like one of those jazz interview. Yeah, yeah,
Look,
it sounds great, and then that did you yeah, I always think, did you practice that? Did you
well,
write that
no,
out?
he's a street musician, man. This guy, I mean, this guy's a street artist.
I mean,
Anyways, but
it's a great thing, but, playing music doesn't work that way. You
okay, now here's the real lead up is Monk said there are no wrong notes. Any comment?
Well, people would say that Schoenberg said that too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, in a different way, and they probably would have actually agreed that probably there are some wrong notes if you at the wrong time. It just did,
Hello.
so
Yeah,
it's more like not the road, but the wrongness of the note isn't in the pitch or the note; it's when you play it.
that's it. The Hannah Brooks said, are there any wrong notes?" She goes, "There's wrong notes. It's just how good you cover them up."
Well, in the resonance, there, if you hit a wrong note, the rule was you had to play it twice.
Yeah, oh yeah, that goes well,
That's a
that's
that's a bad band. That's an incompetent band rule.
well, no, that's also a Miles Davis line, you repeat it and you work it into the composition, and that was you must have ESP, Phil, because that led right into Miles talks about the space between notes. In fact, George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, says funk is the absence of. How do you integrate silence in your compositions? How do you know when to not play or when to have silence? Where's any sort of any sort of thoughts on silence in not playing?
Silence is the secret weapon.
Yeah.
That's how you make emphasis. One of the masters of silence that I work with is the choreographer Alonzo King, where all hell will break loose on stage, both in terms of the bodies moving and the music, and then it'll stop dead, and there'll be kind of the choreographic equivalent of silence of maybe only a single person moving just barely.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everything that came before somehow makes more sense. And because also, I don't like art that is basically the wall of sound all the time. You have to, you've got to like stop so that you can start again. And silence, is the thing that gives you the moment to consider what it is you just experienced, and kind of, I don't know, I hate this metaphor. I hate that cleanse the palate thing, but it's like you need a vacation, especially in modern music. Is a punctuation.
It's called dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So LA Free Press in the summer of 69, Frank Zappa mentioned Pauline Oliveros. Her work with sound above the audible and below, creating a mass. Here's what Frank said. Not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a some indifference tone which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle that you could hear. Whether or not you liked what you heard in the middle is another question. The concept is brilliant. Suss out that. What is that some indifference tone? How do you react to what Frank just said?
Well, I have my own personal experiences with Pauline. And she was one of the greatest musical geniuses that I'd ever met, and I was really, really lucky to get to work with her a couple of times. And the thing about her, similarly to like Blue Jean, she just surprised you all the time. And part of what was surprising is because what you just described seems like a really obvious thing to do, except that she did it. In other words, like, it's one of those things when you hear it, you kind of go, oh, of course. But, but she had the clarity of vision to understand that might be interesting and that it was worth trying.
Yeah.
I mean, my idea of her is clouded by my personal experience with her, but that's the kind of thing that she would come up with practically on the spot sometimes.
Yeah.
As an improviser.
Her words, deep listening. How would you explain that to the normal person on the street in a couple lines? How could you explain that? What is deep listening?
Trying to, well, I take it very simplistically, which is like, we have so much distraction, and the idea that actually most people don't ever really just listen to something. They're almost always also looking.
Yeah.
So, the idea that you're only going to listen and not try to suppress your other senses and see where that takes you.
It's really good. That's Finnegan's Wake. See, if you read a book, you're using your eyes mainly. Joyce required you to read a book out loud, so he shifted the eye experience to the ear experience. But you still have to look at the words. You're not just like listening to great actors recite Ulysses. You're looking at the words and seeing how the other people in the group are mispronunciating these typos in every word. So thank you on that. Pauline, amazing. Yeah, I asked her about that quote one time in a parking lot. No, in a parking lot in Santa Monica. She's playing the accordion. Parking structure, not a lot. It was like down underneath.
Right, probably sounded great.
Yeah, it was great.
She really liked echoey spaces.
Yeah. Leonard Cohen says the only way you can sell a concert is to put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. What role does risk play in your creative process?
Well, I think the biggest risk in my process is that of possibly boring people who might hear my work on the radio. Other than that, I'd have to say there probably wasn't much risk in my personal work. There's risk in the work that I do for other people, like for instance for the um, dance company, where we're going to what you do definitely materially affects the work of other people. But for myself, I don't know. It's possibly that I chose working on these kind of sound pieces is because I'm kind of risk averse, so that might be one of the reasons I do it or work that way. I don't. In other words, I don't perform live anymore,
Yeah.
and partly because I was not a very good performer, and nowadays all my friends that are performers that I would want to sit in with, it'd be like asking somebody who was a tennis pro if you could play tennis with them. It's like, well, they might do it once because they like you, but it's not going to be any fun for them.
Yeah.
So
Well,
no.
what does courage mean to you now?
Well, doing the right thing, even if you don't want to.
Yeah. Viola Spolin said, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. What role does struggle play in your creative process? I mean, with what you're doing now.
Well, I think part of everything that I do is just like, there's this certain aspect where it's like something has to seem like it's worth doing, like
Yeah.
it can't be too easy.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I maybe that's because that if you continue to do the same thing over and over again, you never grow.
Yeah. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Probably compromise anymore. There's too many people with too many convictions that are not tethered to the ground.
Phil, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. Thank you. So you've accomplished a lot in your life. How do you rate these three elements? You sort of touched on this earlier. Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Luck, in that order. Luck, skill,
In that
ambition.
order.
Yeah.
T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
It's not in a language. It's in. And I'm always trying to get my mind to shut up and listen. That's probably why I do what I do. I really don't. The in my mind, I feel like I'm always trying to tell myself that I talk too much.
Yeah. It sounds like, Abigail Childs, I says, what role is uh, what form is your inner conscious or what uh in your inner dialogue is? She goes, I wish I knew.
That's good. Good.
George Manupel, who started Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago, over 60 years ago, his mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Well, going back to the question that you asked much earlier, it's just like, no, I'm doing this because I want to hear sort of what I'm thinking about. What I mean, one of the things that I learned from Blue Jean was that he was just wildly experimental. I just want to hear what these two things sound like together.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah.
I might ever play it again, but
Yeah.
uh,
Was that because we play music? We don't work music. Is it more like play is what you're talking about?
well, I don't know if I agree because I think a lot of people who are professional musicians, like orchestra players, they're working.
Yeah.
That's a job. That's a really hard job.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of concentration. It takes a lot of physical strength. It takes an incredible amount of attention. I'm sure they enjoy it and they enjoy it. That's different from somebody who's sitting on a beach playing a flute by themselves,
Yeah.
or me screwing around with, Ableton on my laptop and a bunch
Yeah.
of songs I recorded on my phone. It's a question of responsibility to a greater, like for instance, when the dance company is doing something live with live musicians, we're all working to make this piece work for the audience. But and the part of the work of it is that the thing that you can't do is anything you want
Yeah.
at that moment.
Can art making be egoless?
Probably not.
Is perception reality?
No.
Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast.
Breakfast.
Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Um, yeah, but I'm not going to share it with you. Sorry.
Thank you, Phil. I really like this time with you. It's really been fun. So Sun Ra said the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
That's right. Very good.
That was, of all places, Phil, that was the New Yorker quoting Sun Ra. I mean, has the world improved? The New Yorker is quoting Sun Ra. Okay, tell me one major element of your creativeness that stayed the same and one major element that's changed. Or your Philness, you. What's one major element that stayed the same? What's one major element that's changed in the many years you've been being Phil?
Well, the thing that hasn't changed is just, um, art based on screwing around,
Yeah,
just trying stuff out,
yeah,
not particularly disciplined. Um, and, you kind of the artistic equivalent of not reading the manual.
yeah,
And the thing that's probably changed is I feel like I'm more considerate about what I inflict of my work on other people and how I do it. So
yeah.
I don't like, is the typical college songwriter goes out and sits out in front of the dorm and yells their songs at
Uh,
everybody. Okay, so that's the thing I don't do anymore, or any
yeah.
equivalent of that. So
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
well, I'd like to think that, I have a sensitivity to sound. Sounds bother me. I have a really hard time sleeping if there's any kind of sound. So that's it. Like a lot of sound people or sound engineers, sound mixers, front of house people, things like that.
Yeah,
That work started because they had a certain sensitivity to that and a need to try to make things work sonically. I
yeah.
think it's a pretty common trait among those people.
What's the roots of that, Phil? Was the way your parents raised you? I got on your own. Where do you think that came from, that
I
sensitivity to sound?
That might be genetic. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
Some people are just that way. So, why
yeah,
are some people drawn to doing things with sound, doing work with sound, and some people are drawn to work with picture? I don't know.
yeah, yeah. Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when
It's directed at yourself.
what's the most significant difference between women and men, physical aside?
Well, I don't have a really good answer except that in my professional work, what I find myself working with women more of the time, and I've always wondered why that was. This is particularly true as a re-recording mixer, doing the post-production of sound on mostly documentaries. I thought, why is that? And I said, and I really finally decided it was because women were willing to work with somebody else, and guys all think they know how to do everything already.
Yeah. What caused matriarchy?
What caused matriarchy?
Yeah.
I don't understand the question.
Yeah. Anyways, it's rule by women or women in
No, I know
charge.
what it means. I don't understand what you're asking.
Well, it's sort of like what's behind it, what caused it. I mean, I guess it's biology that women give birth, but people have said various things. Yeah, it's a confusing.
Vis-a-vis what I just said, because they were in professionally, and this is a terrible generalization. They generally seem to be more willing to organize themselves,
Yeah,
to get something done in a somewhat more egoless way.
yeah.
With guys, somebody has to be the boss always. So I don't know.
I think it's because of they giving birth.
Oh, okay.
And they're the nurturing force. So that's why they were the organizing force. We gave the birth. We're propagating the species. I mean, it is a confusing question, because if you thought that one was confusing, how about this one? Hollis Frampton said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
What does that sound like, Hollis?
No,
No,
that's Hollis quote. Now
yeah, but that definitely sounds like something he'd say. But
so here's the quote I set up with. Can you forget to die?
I don't know.
Yeah. So it's a question that people look at me like, what do you mean? Literally or metaphorically? Okay, so Phil, we got about 15 more minutes. I really appreciate your time here. Thank you. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. Louis Buñuel said, thank God I'm an atheist. So the basic thing is, I'm wondering, what's your take on this line? You create what you resist. One creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
No. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. It's totally okay. How do you find peace of mind?
Partly by working on something of my own, which doesn't get to happen that much anymore because I'm busy with other people's stuff. And other than that, I like to try to walk in nature.
Yeah, walking in nature. How beautiful. These are 5 Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a couple words. 1, who started it all?
I don't know. Seems like a trick question.
2, are we going to make it?
Yeah, but what make it means, we don't know.
Very good. Where do we put it?
Wherever it fits.
4, who's cleaning it up?
Everybody.
5, is it serious?
Deadly.
I asked my friend, he wrote comedy with Robin Williams, can satire be destructive? He said, that's the job of satire. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
Well, I think one of the great functions of it is, and I'm thinking of somebody like George Carlin or somebody, is that he distills for you what is ridiculous about the people who you are perceived to have power in this world, and that's very useful as to people who think that they don't have any power.
Yeah. Yeah, I was lucky. I got to work for George for a half a year, and one of my favorite lines he said is, how could we ever have a civil war? You can. Civil means between two cities, but most people think when they hear civil, it means acting nice to another human. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Slow down and shut up.
Ben Ratliff, a music writer, said, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art. As in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So me and you could hear Miles, and Ben would say, okay, I'm going to summarize in 2 words: fragile and pointed. Coltrane, slightly undercooked and urgent. If a music writer you really respected was going to summarize Phil's sound in 2 words, what 2 would you feel? Hey, he kind of got me.
Too much reverb.
Too much reverb. I was holding off from asking you that one, but you really too much reverb. Utah Phillips said, yeah, thank you, Phil, because that's what this series is all about, is to have fun. Okay, but you were serious, right? Utah Phillips says, anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
The people. Only.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that they're entitled, but they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, this question I'll set up with some quotes is, what does freedom mean to you now? So it's funny because that anarchy definition by Utah, an anarchist in the Bay Area, told me that's not the definition for anarchy. But you look up the word freedom, and etymologically it breaks down to giving oneself one's own laws, which caused T.S. Eliot to say freedom is only truly freedom when it appears against the background of an artificial limitation, which caused McLuhan to say, how are you to argue with people who insist on sticking their heads in the invisible teeth of technology and calling the whole thing freedom? What does freedom mean to you now?
Not being dead, mostly, and not being deathly ill. Being free of, I mean, it's mostly, that I'm an old person, and, a lot of people that I know have passed, and other people I know live lives of pain. It's like, okay, well, I kind of live a life of pain too, but not quite that bad. But I'm still free that I could go walk around the block if I wanted to. I mean, it's really pedestrian. It's a weird, it's just funny term to use, but that's what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
And whereas like somebody, say, who lives in the eastern part of Ukraine or Rafa cannot do that. They don't have freedom.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
There's a requirement here. There's actually no discussion. That was put to rest many decades ago.
That the patent is over 100 years old and hasn't gone over, but there are a small percentage of people who say under is the right way, and they have their reasons.
I'm sure they do.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I'm not going to tell you.
That's the title, or that's the statement you're reacting?
I think it might be the title.
Bill, you are brilliant. They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Oh, wow. If they could do it, the breeze coming off the ocean.
Oh, yeah. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed, and what would it be made of?
Oh, I hate the whole idea. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. It's all right. Tell me something good you never had and you never want?
A Tesla.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Jerry, this is getting a little far afield. Uh,
That's what you
I,
do.
I would, I would do the best I can.
The best you can. That's good. You know what Mike Kelly said?
No, I
Cry.
don't know.
He said, cry. But I'll tell you the best answer was this woman on the boardwalk. She says, I'd take the bag of shit, the velocity of it, and I'd use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. I said, dude, that's Descent in the Maelstrom, the Edgar Allan Poe poem.
Mhm.
Beautiful. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Well, the younger people who are interested in doing something that seems related to what I do, both professionally and artistically, um, are extremely empowered and unafraid to experiment and unafraid to put the work out and unafraid to have it be part of some kind of social milieu, which is really interesting. So that and that the social aspect of it is as important as their personal aspect to it. And part of the social aspect is how it relates to even politics and the world around them. So that's it's not that that's new. It's just simpler to do, and it's kind of like assumed, by these people to be that is going to be part of all of their practice, and their all of their practice is all of their practice. It's like a shared practice. There's a lot more feeling of wanting to cooperate and less of, I am a soloist and you will now listen to me. It's just, and that's pretty cool.
Yep, I agree. What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
What am I going to make tomorrow?
How has being the creative Phil you are shaped your behavior? Like, how has being a sound artist and a sound engineer, filmmaker, all the things you've been, how has that shaped your behavior?
Well, the terrible thing to admit is it's probably made me selfish, because it means so much to me to do that, and you can't do everything. So you end up doing that instead of some other things that people who are important to you might want you to do. But, the part of being an artist is, the culture and the world kind of constantly tells you that what you're doing isn't important if you're not successful. And even if you are successful, only the things that make you successful are important. So, in order to make something on your own, you have to like take time and energy away from other things. And that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. That seems selfish to them. And it even seems a little bit selfish to me, but that's the only way anything can ever happen.
I appreciate your honesty, Phil, because it reminded me kind of two quotes. Reverend Al from Flipside said, "Don't sell out, sneak in." And Paul Schrader said, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail. Now that's funny, but it's also sort of weird because it's like my art is so pure that I tried to sell out, but I failed, you know. But
No,
it
I
is.
think for most of it, or for me anyway, it's just, my art is just so bad that I tried to sell out and I failed.
I tried to get in that outsider art, outsider music book, but he would. The thing about outsider art is that once it started as this big trend, if you went into a gallery and says, "Hey, you want to look at my portfolio? I'm an outsider artist." They go, "You ever take an art class?" Yes. I
Uh,
won't look at it.
Yeah.
Out of here. It's like you had a lie. Were your parents artists? Yes, you're out of here. Like yeah, are you in a mental hospital and you've never gone to an art museum in your life? Okay, maybe we'll consider it. Okay, two more. We're out of here. Thank you. This is Thornton Wilder in 28. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this, Phil. What's it really all about for you?
I just like making this work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's just not anything deeper about it. The work that I make, at one point, the work was about something. Now it's about me or about itself or possibly about nothing. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's my need to make it.
Yeah, I got a whole lecture on nothingness, and my favorite is Frank Zappa and Roxy. He goes, "Nothing is what I want."
All right.
What gives you the most optimism?
Probably seeing people work together on something and have it work out.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing because the first question, Phil, is what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich says the best thing for a human being is another human being. They asked the last question is what gives you most optimism? I got that from a question they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life, and he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, Phil. Thank you so much for your time and energy. It's really fun, and I appreciate how articulate and concise you were.
Nice meeting you.
Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Okay. Nice for you to say. Bye-bye.